Summary of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Dr. John Montague, an anthropologist and parapsychologist, wants to prove that the field of parapsychology is real by doing groundbreaking new research. He invites a group of psychically sensitive people from all over the country to spend part of the summer at Hill House, a mansion in the northeastern United States that has a reputation for being very haunted. Eleanor Vance, who was haunted as a child and spent most of her adult life caring for her sick mother, who just died, and Theodora, a bohemian psychic with clairvoyant abilities who lives with a roommate in a big city, are the only two people to accept his invitation. Luke Sanderson, who is in line to inherit Hill House from his family, also offers his time for the summer. According to Montague's lease, a member of the family that owns Hill House must be there during the experiment to keep an eye on what the renters are doing to the house, since problems have happened there in the past with renters. Eleanor Vance steals the car she owns with her sister Carrie and brother-in-law and drives over 100 miles to Hill House, excited to finally have an adventure of her own. As soon as she gets to the house and meets Mr. and Mrs. Dudley, the guardians, she realizes she is the first person there. She also feels a very bad energy coming from the house. Still, Eleanor wants an adventure, so she decides to stay instead of running away and going home. She meets Theodora soon after, and the two young women become fast friends. Eleanor is impressed by Theodora's beauty and wit. Soon, Dr. Montague and Luke Sanderson show up. Dr. Montague says that Hill House has been haunted for as long as 80 years. Hugh Crane, the man who built it, made it on purpose confusing and hard to find your way around. After his wife died in the driveway, strange things started to happen in the house. As soon as the four people arrive at Hill House, they start to explore and map its twisted depths. Strange things happen, mostly at night, but the group is excited by the beating, shaking, strange laughter, and cold spots in the house and on the grounds. The four people laugh about the presence that is all around them, and they talk for a long time over meals and drinks after dinner about what it means to be afraid, what it feels like to be scared, and whether or not the house is trying to turn them against each other. But when someone writes something about Eleanor in chalk on the wall of the Great Hall one afternoon, the group becomes more scared and suspicious of each other. The others think that Eleanor wrote the scary words herself, but Eleanor is shocked by the idea that the house might be picking on her. After more scary things happen, like a scary presence that Theodora sees in the woods and more writing on the wall, this time in blood, Dr. Montague calls his wife, Mrs. Montague, who is also a parapsychologist, to join the team. Mrs. Montague comes to Hill House with her friend and traveling partner, Arthur Parker. She is unhappy with how things are going so far and says that she wants to talk to the lonely, tortured spirit inside Hill House by using a planchette, which is a device that writes on its own. Mrs. Montague thinks her husband's ways are stupid and doesn't want to hear about the real terrors the group has already seen. Instead, she insists on talking to the presence on her own. As Eleanor starts to think that Theodora and Luke are talking badly about her behind her back and even plotting against her, she starts to lose touch with reality and feels like the house is telling her to surrender to it. She starts to see and hear things that no one else does, and what's most scary is that Mrs. Montague tells her that her planchette wrote a lot about Eleanor. During a night of strange sights and sounds, Dr. Montague, Theodora, Luke, and Eleanor all stay in the doctor's room to stay strong. However, when things get really bad, Eleanor gives herself over to the house. She feels happy again when she wakes up in the morning, and for some reason she can hear everything going on in the house. Eleanor talks to Theodora about the stress between them and asks if she can move in with Theodora after the experiment is over. Theodora tells Eleanor in a cold way that she doesn't take in lost people. That night, Eleanor gets out of bed in the middle of the night and makes a lot of noise, banging on the doors of everyone else's rooms to wake them up. She then runs away into the library, where she hears her dead mother's voice calling her. She climbs a rotting ladder in the corner of the library to reach a trapdoor that leads to the highest tower of the house. The group comes into the library and tries to get Eleanor to come down from the dangerous stairs by telling her she is acting like a kid and that it is scary. Dr. Montague and the others tell Eleanor in the morning that it is best for her to leave Hill House. Eleanor can't tell the others how much she feels like she belongs in the house and how hard it seems for her to ever leave. Eleanor's friends help her pack and get her car out of the garage. She says goodbye to her friends with tears in her eyes and begs Dr. Montague to let her stay. He makes her get in the car, though, and tells her that she'll feel better once they leave the house. Eleanor starts to pull out of the driveway, but at the last second, she feels driven to drive her car into a big oak tree and kill herself. Eleanor has a moment of understanding just before the crash and wonders why she's doing what she's doing. In a short epilogue, we learn that Dr. Montague's piece about Hill House was met with great disdain from his peers, and he was almost forced to leave academia. The ghostly spirit that has always been at Hill House is still there, walking alone through its rooms.
About the author. Shirley Jackson was born in San Francisco, California, in 1916. She grew up in Burlingame, a town in the Bay Area with middle-class people. Her childhood was hard because she was often alone and had a hard time getting along with her folks. Jackson went to the University of Rochester and Syracuse University after moving across the country with her family to Rochester, New York. She got active with the school literary magazine at Syracuse University, where she met her husband, Stanley Edgar Hyman, who later became a well-known literary critic. Jackson and Hyman lived in New York and then moved to Vermont, where Hyman taught at Bennington College. In North Bennington, Jackson felt out of place and alone, and she had a hard time getting her husband's attention and credit as her own writing career grew. Jackson had to deal with her husband's controlling behavior for years. During that time, she developed agoraphobia and became dependent on prescription drugs, even as her dark, and darkly funny, literary novels The Bird's Nest, The Sundial, The Haunting of Hill House, and We Have Always Lived in the Castle made her famous in the literary world. Jackson died in 1965 at the age of 48. Since then, her work has been brought back to life with the release of Let Me Tell You, a collection of unpublished stories and essays, and the screen and stage adaptations of The Haunting of Hill House and We Have Always Lived in the Castle, both of which have received a lot of praise.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.